A brief study of John chapter 8 verse 58. John chapter 8 verse 58 is perhaps one of the most famous verses of the Bible. It is often quoted to prove that Jesus is a God. Yet, despite this, a closer analysis of this passage reveals a much more complex history behind its meaning. To begin with, let's take a look at the passage itself. Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." In the Greek of the New Testament, the passage reads, Prin Abram genestai ego aimi. This is supposed to be a reference to the Old Testament, a quote from the Greek Old Testament known as the Greek Septuagint. Upon closer examination of Exodus chapter 3 verse 14, which John chapter 8 verse 58 is allegedly referencing, we read in part, "And God said to Moses, Ego aimi ho on, I am the one being." In comparison to John chapter 8 verse 58, we immediately notice that Jesus allegedly did not complete the reference. The quote is left unfinished. Why? The answer is fairly simple and straightforward. Looking more closely at John chapter 8 verse 58, Jesus is merely claiming to have existed in some way before Abraham. The question therefore becomes, what does it mean to exist before Abraham? Ephesians chapter 1 verse 4 helps us understand how we all existed before the earthly Abraham. The verse reads, "Just as he, God, chose us in him, God, before the foundation of the world, for us to be holy and blameless before him, God." Therefore, John chapter 8 verse 58 is not a claim of divinity, but a claim of confirming that the will of God is upon the Messiah and those who follow the Messiah, and that this same will of approval was also upon Abraham, while in rejection of those who rejected them both. A closer examination of Exodus chapter 3 verse 14 from the Greek Septuagint further solidifies this understanding. The verse in its entirety reads, "And God said to Moses, I am the one being. And he said, Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, the one being has sent me to you." Jesus in the New Testament, specifically in the Gospel of John, fulfills this passage. Jesus does not say he sent himself, but rather God sent him to the people of Israel. We read, in John's Gospel, Jesus uses the Greek verb pempine to refer to the Father who sent me, no fewer than 24 times. In another 17 passages, however, some form of the verb apostoline is used to focus instead on Jesus as the one who is sent. This verb invests Jesus' acts with the full authority of the Father because he seems to do only what the Father wills. For as Matthew chapter 26 verse 39b says, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Why then did the Pharisees of his day try to stone him to death for his statement? It is because they were looking for an excuse to kill him, as they had done to other prophets in the past. As the New Testament says in Matthew chapter 23, verse 37, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing." In conclusion, John chapter 8 verse 58 cannot be a claim to divinity, and to understand it as such is to ignore the full biblical context of the passage.